Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher nishanu b'mitzvot v'tivanu l'sifrei divrei Torah. V'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah b'finim fi'im Beit Yisrael. ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאיהם בית ישראל כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה ברוך אתה ה' המלמד תורה לאמור ישראל.
Amen.
Amen.
ברוך אתה ה' אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בך בא לנו כל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו ברוך אתה ה' נותן התורה.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Now I want to quickly share my screen because Kevin had a good question. I'll tell you what it is.
Ah, I like it.
Kev's question is, he spoke to his friend Simeon Shapira and Gavin Brule, and I want to emphasize this. He has not fulfilled the mitzvah. I just want you to guys to read that.
Yeah, I'll just minimize the
read it.
Hold on once. Okay, let's see it. Okay.
Ala Aretz Vala Mazon.
Yeah.
Just read that for everybody, because
we praise and thank Hashem for the amazing land of Israel. Within this bracha, we also mention two mitzvahs through which we merit to live in the land: A, Brit Milah, B, a Torah learning. It is important to know that if a man, as opposed to a woman, left out these two ideas, what's it? Okay, I can't say it. In this bracha, he has not fulfilled left out. He has not fulfilled the mitzvah of benching. However, leaving it out is rare, as we are used to the standard text in order. Okay, thank you. I misunderstood you. Sorry, Damon.
So what I was saying
if you omitted it.
Anyway, you say it anyway in the Hebrew. All I was saying the other day is that you have to be cognizant of the Hebrew you're reading in order to be yoitzi the brocha. So because if you say gobbledygook, you're not yoitzi.
Okay, exactly, so you have to say it clearly.
I'm saying you've got to understand what you're saying. So what you can tell Simeon is that it actually isn't a brocha anyway. In other words, there's a difference between meriting staying in the land to live there, to have the merit to retain the land, and being initially allowed by forefathers in the land. And therefore, since that is in the brocha, what I was advising you guys to do last time is when you do the brochas in Hebrew, in the original Lashon HaKodesh, what you should do is read the paragraph afterwards in English so that you're cognizant of what you are saying. Because if you say anything in language that doesn't make sense to you, how are you yoitzi? You probably have fulfilled it in a certain level. But if you don't know what you're saying, it's immaterial. So that's what I'm saying.
You are yoitzi, that's it. But maybe on a lower level.
Yeah, but the point of that is you're not yoitzi because you haven't even said it in the Hebrew. So there's a difference. It's in the Hebrew.
If you say it in the Hebrew, without thinking about it, you're still yoitzi, but a lower level. Okay, you must say it in okay.
Yeah, but it's in the wording of the Hebrew anyway.
Yes,
it's in the wording of the Hebrew anyway. It's just not great if you don't understand anything you say.
Of course, so that applies to everything. Yeah, sure. Shema,
mouth the words. The wording is all in the bench. You just have to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the concept of Brit Milah and learning Torah, and that's the reason why we merit living in Israel. Simeon needs to actually realize that he needs to just look at the English again and see that maybe when he does benching, like all of us, we've raced through it and we're not aware of what the Hebrew means in English. We're all Anglos, we're all English speakers. So just to be aware, it's in the wording.
I know. Right. I said it. I framed it. I said, if you say, I thought what you said is if you say it, and without being aware of what you're saying, then you're not yotzis. But that's I said that to them. That's what was me, not them. But they said if you say it, you are yotzi. So they were correct.
Yeah, it's not a great level to just.
No, sure, of course. That's what everything. That's what the Shema, everything. I know. I talk to myself. Sure.
So, well, for me,
Okay,
certainly.
sure. Thank you. Thanks for
All right, but
clarifying.
let's get in the daf and let's see what we're going to do. Shame, as we're on 22a, so I'll just tell you what we discussed last time. Is we answer the question, because the Gemara challenged Reish Lakish from a different source. It said, come learn a proof from the following Mishnah. If a camel laden with flax was passing through the public domain, whereupon its flax went into the shop and was set ablaze by the lamp of the shopkeeper, and it then set fire to a mansion outside, the camel's owner is liable to pay for damage. Okay, so what we said is that was contradicting the Mishnah according to Reish Lakish, who said that if Arthur comes over to my place and I'm cooking food with coals, and Arthur's animal steals a biscuit off the fire, which has a coal in it, and then it's hot and it tosses it and burns a stack of hay, then obviously the half payment damage is for the case of Toros, and the only thing that Arthur has to pay for is the exact place where the coal landed, because Reish Lakish deems a fire a person's property, not his arrows, and therefore that spread of that fire, according to Reish Lakish, or for the rest of the stack, isn't eligible for two reasons. There wasn't direct contact, and secondly, it would seem that the coals being mine are not Arthur's responsibility because it was his dog, but my coals. Had it been Arthur's coals and Arthur's dog, it's the one who owns the fire. The coals is responsible for the fire. So therefore, Arthur would get off the hook. Whereas with Rav Yochanan, Arthur would still have to pay because his dog, through Toros, through his arrows, through his horse, created the fire. So we're saying here that the Gemara brings a brisa to seemingly contradict this, and it says that basically it's the same sort of case. It looks like on the surface. Arthur has a camel, and then he brings the camel into my shop. Okay. Where it had flax on its back and it caught fire. So in this case, Arthur's camel had a whole portable flamethrower on its back and was running through and set alight either my mansion or the next door neighbor mansion by the shop. And therefore Arthur's responsible. So they're saying, why is Arthur responsible? Because as the shopkeeper, it's my fire. Okay? So it wants to address two issues. The first issue is, in the first place, Arthur's not responsible for his dog on the biscuit because Arthur never did anything wrong. In the second case, it's a bit of a different story because Arthur laden the camel with flax. That was excessive, and when you go into a shop, the animal had no business being in the shop, number one. And obviously to illuminate a shop with light, there's always going to be what you call lamps. So what are you doing creating a flammable camel? Camels are cigarettes. I know those should be flammable, but not this sort of camel. There's a lot of flax on there, and it just caught alight, and therefore the camel's owner is responsible. And the proof of it is if you carry on with the brisa, it says if the shopkeeper placed his lamp outside the shop in the public domain, then the shopkeeper is liable to pay for the damage. Why? Because he's now created a public hazard where animals walk and people walk. So in that case, the shop owner is liable because he actually has created a damage of his own volition. It's not like he's trying to illuminate his shop. And then furthermore, animals walk outside. So it's very likely that if animals are carrying a load, that the flammability aspect will be there and some woman's shaitel. So based on that, he's responsible, the shopkeeper, if it happens outside, but not on Hanukkah, according to Rav Yehuda, as we learned, because Hanukkah is a time where you have to publicize the mitzvah, and everybody's going to have their Hanukkah outside. Okay. So what we're just going to discuss here is that aspect, that second aspect now is this concept of direct contact. Okay. Now there are going to be times in this Mishnah that Gavin and I and Kevin and Arthur are going to agree with seeing it more from Reish Lakish's point of view, and sometimes from Rav Yochanan. You'll see how it goes. So sometimes you'll feel more inclined to go with the one, sometimes more inclined to feel that you're going with the other. Does that make sense? You'll see. But the important thing is just to learn from both, and you'll see how they reconcile eventually in certain ways. So if we look at it, the camel basically has set fire to the mansion by brushing its burning load against it. And this ensuing blaze is deemed the arrows of the camel. So what do we mean by the arrows of the camel, Gavin?
So if it's leaving with the arrows of the camel, it's the force of the it's another force. It's pushing it.
Yes, yes.
It's an external force. It's not the animal itself.
Correct. Yeah. So basically,
And then you're liable for the full amount, not just the contact area, the full whatever it destroys.
Okay, so this is what it's saying, is that it's saying the ensuing blaze for which the owner must pay half the damage. So this is what seems to be interesting, is that in a certain case, in a certain case, we learned from the first Mishnah. Okay, dog takes a biscuit. Dog is liable for full damages for shame for eating the biscuit in the yard of another. Okay, so then it's full payment. But then if you look at the Mishnah, it says half payment damages for what? For the stack. It doesn't
So
say
it is carrying. It is carrying, so it's half. Yeah.
No. There's a reason why it's half. There's a separate reason.
Because Soros.
Yes, you're on the mark. That's exactly.
No, there's one of the other. Sorry, I got mixed up. Thank you.
And no, Gavin is right, because there is an argument whether the dog throwing the biscuit is an unusual act of carrying time, at which that's an argument for why we pay half damages. And the other arguments, it's Soros. But in this particular brisa, we see it at Soros, where the animal basically doesn't create the direct flame. So in other words, if the animal sets alight a beam, the area where it sets alight directly in the mansion cave, that area where there's direct contact between the flame and the beams, then there's full payment damages. The area where one beam caught onto another beam caught onto another, and the whole mansion ended up burning in smoke, that's half payment damages for the non-direct contact area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Non-direct contact area. Just explain what that is.
Okay, so let me explain to you what I'm saying. The Mishnah says as follows, is that there's full payment damages for shame for the biscuit and half payment damages for the stack. I can share the Mishnah, and what that's saying is the reason there's half payment damages for the stack of grain is because it's deemed that it's the animal's, it's not where the fire originally was. It's where it caught alight and spread. Therefore, it's an ongoing force. Therefore, an ongoing force was known as a person's arrows, Soros. And for Soros, the opinion is you pay half payment damages for the stack. So the point of the mansion at which you set alight is the part where it's full damages, and where the fire got out of control and consumed the rest of the mansion. This is according to the Rashba and Panay Yeshua, that the half payment of the damages for the mansion not ignited directly by the camel, and full damages for the point of contact. So keep it simple. Here's the camel. And if the camel set alight part of the mansion, because it's all wood, then for that direct contact of the flax on his back and the flame, full payment. The rest of the mansion that caught alight, because it's all flammable, it's Soros. It's a person's arrows, a person's force. And we learn for payment of Soros, it's half payment damages. That's what we learn. So that's half payment damages. Full payment only for direct contact of flamage. All right, so let's move on. So it basically says, it ends up by saying, the Gemara now developed its challenge to Reish Lakish. Now, this is the first part of the Mishnah is understandable. According to the one who says one is liable for his fire on account of it being deemed his arrows. For in this case, it's the camel's arrows or force, let's use the word force, that has caused the damage. But how is this to be understood according to the one who says that one is liable for his fire on account of it being his property, when the fire is not the property of the camel owner? So we already said here that the Gemara answers, Reish Lakish would say to you, in his own defense, with what case are we dealing with here? Where the camel ignites the entire mansion. So the half payment damages and that sort of damage is according to Rav Yochanan, because he sees that an animal created the first sort of flamage, and for the direct contact was full payment, and for the rest of the mansion that set alight from the flammable nature of the beams, it's half payment damages. So if Reish Lakish doesn't see it as his force, his arrows, how does he explain it? So Reish Lakish will say to you, it rubs its burning load against the entire face of the mansion, so that all of it is set on fire directly by the camel. The entire mansion, therefore, is analogous to the place of the coal mentioned in the previous Gemara, with the biscuit and the stack of grain. That's according to Rashi. And the Mishnah means that the camel's owner pays full damages for the mansion. So certainly the direct contact of the burning load doesn't literally engulf the entire mansion in flames in one go, guys. Rather, it means that the load directly ignites each and every beam. And each beam directly ignited by the load is considered to be the place of direct contact. Even though some of the beam is destroyed by the fire that spread naturally from the ignited part of the beam to the rest of the beam. That's according to the Ravad and Meiri. Similarly, in the case of the stack, each straw touched by the coal will be deemed the actual place of the coal. But since each piece of straw is a distinct unit, the remainder of the stack is not deemed the place of the coal. So all we are saying here is that there are basically two aspects to realize, according to Reish Lakish, is that Rav Yochanan sees that a fire continuing is basically a person's arrows of force, of which there's tororos, half payment damages, and for the actual direct contact, full payment. Whereas Reish Lakish would have to explain that full payment damages are required for direct contact, and that anything that there's not direct contact, there's no payment required. Okay? That's what I want you to get. All right. So let's move on to the next part. So the Gemara then asks, if so, then I'll challenge you to say and explain the end of the Mishnah, which states, if the shopkeeper placed his lamp outside, then the shopkeeper is liable to pay for the damage. So now, if the Mishnah speaks of where the camel ignited the entire mansion by rubbing its burning load against it, then why is the shopkeeper who has left his lamp outside liable? So the Gemara answers, we meant that the camel stood in one place. Okay, so I'm going to explain this now. So if she stood in one place and ignited the entire mansion, then certainly the shopkeeper should be partially free of liability and the camel's owner liable. So the Gemara answers, Rav Huna bar Manoach reported in the name of Rav Ika, with what case are we dealing with where she stood still to urinate? So what are we basically saying? Gav, what are we saying before I explain it?
What about the camel now with the urination?
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I didn't have full focus, but I think just continue. I can take a stab, but I think it'll be might be off. Just go ahead.
All right. So what we're saying is, in this case, why should the shop, in the case where there's a fire outside, why should the shopkeeper be entirely responsible? Because what happened is the camel owner saw his camel set alight, and he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. So why aren't they both responsible? The shopkeeper for actually having a flame outside where it's hazardous, where animals walk and people walk. And number two, why isn't the camel's owner responsible, or at least partially, for the damage, since he saw his camel alight with the flax on the back and went into the mansion, or went into their private domain and set it alight? Why didn't the camel's owner do anything from that point? In other words, why didn't the owner intervene with the camel? And therefore, since he didn't intervene, why is he liable to not share the payment with the shopkeeper? Okay, guys, the shopkeeper is responsible.
Sorry, Damon.
Yeah.
Did this happen outside the store, outside the entrance to the store, inside the store, the damage?
Okay, so that's a good question. What we're saying is here, we understand that the shopkeeper is responsible because here he wasn't lighting up the store. He basically put his flame outside in the area, which exactly as Kevin said, in the public domain, it's very dangerous to have your flame there because there are animals walking there with flammable loads. You must remember all the animals were workhorses. They had flammable loads on their backpacks, and therefore the shopkeeper was remiss. But what we are saying here is that before the camel went running towards a private domain, like a mansion, and set it alight, why isn't the camel owner also partially responsible for allowing his camel to do so, as well as the shopkeeper? Because again, the shopkeeper was negligent for creating a flame where there are other animals and flammable goods. And the camel owner is also negligent, the Gemara wants to know, because he never stopped his camel. So therefore, the Gemara brings this issue from Rav Huna bar Manoach, reported in the name of Rav Ika. With what case are we dealing with here? With an animal that stood still to urinate. So what it's saying is as follows. When you've got a camel that weighs half a ton, and that camel's got a flammable pack on its back, and it sits there to urinate while it's next to flammable material that catches a light, you're not going to move that. The camel owner isn't going to be able to move that camel in that circumstance. And in that circumstance, the owner of the camel is not going to be held liable. So we want to say that if this particular Bryce is saying that the animal's owner is not liable, it's when he couldn't budge the camel. For circumstances such as these, yeah.
But why did the owner of the store light the fire in the public domain outside his store in the first place? What was the purpose? Was he entitled to?
No, he wasn't entitled to. That's why he's liable. The only question it wants to know here is why is the camel's owner not also liable to help stopping the camel from spreading the fire? Because as Kevin said, the guy, what was he doing setting his flame there? And the shopkeeper is liable, but what are we saying is why isn't the camel's owner sharing in the liability, since he could have stopped his animal? He said, have you tried stopping an animal that over 500 kilograms it wants to stop and urinate? You're not going to budge that animal. So if it's already creating some sort of fire hazard and it's stopping to urinate and there's a thatch roof there, the house is going to go up in flames, believe me. You're not going to move that animal for love or money. Therefore, in that circumstances, we don't hold the owner of the camel liable. So we're on 22b1, and I just want to...
Damon, just hold on 1 second. So the owner of the camel is liable if the camel is not urinating or defecating or something like that.
It would seem so, yeah. Because it would seem from here...
But how do you stop a burning camel? I mean, it's very difficult, just practically. Even if it's not urinating or anything, the camel's running away from you, it's burning, it's surrounded by flames, and you've got to try to stop it. It's not an easy thing to do, I'm just saying.
I think you're right, and I think that's why in most opinions, it was setting an example here. But in most opinions, I think Gavin is right, which is exactly why the shopkeeper is liable. It used an example here of urination, but generally to stop a 400 kilogram animal that was half a light, where you don't want to catch a light or be kicked by a camel or bitten, is very difficult. So I think in that particular case, that's why I would hold the shopkeeper liable for exactly the reasons Gavin said. I think it used this example as urination just as an example. So basically in the Mishnah's first case, where the shopkeeper had his lamp inside the shop, the camel's owner is liable because he should not have made the load so large that it would protrude into the shop. In the Mishnah's last case, the shopkeeper is liable because he should not have placed his lamp outside. Okay. So, and the shopkeeper alone has been negligent, since the camel's owner could not pull away his camel, which had stopped in front of the mansion to urinate. Thus, the shopkeeper alone is liable. But I would go according to what Gavin said, because it's very difficult to control big animals. So the Gemara successfully explained the Mishnah according to Reish Lakish, the same basic explanation that in the first part of the Mishnah, only the camel's owner was negligent. In the second part, only the shopkeeper. And that holds true of Rav Yochanan also, except that he doesn't have to add the conditions that the camel rubbed its load against the entire mansion, that the camel came to a stop in front of the mansion and could not be budged by the owner. I'll tell you why. Because if you want to deem that it's his arrows, all the animal would have to do is settle out a portion, and then the rest of the flame that would continue as a result, if it's deemed the animal's force, the animal's owner would be responsible for half payment damages. Only Reish Lakish has this issue of direct contact, where you'd have to stop the animal from urinating. Because each and every part of the mansion would almost be set alight in sequence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, whereas with Rav Yochanan, if part of the mansion was set alight and it was in wood, and the rest of the mansion became flammable and burned to the ground, according to Rav Yochanan, that's a case of tzoros, of which it's half payment damages. So it's only this issue of stopping the animal that would be a scenario that would have to be set up according to Reish Lakish. Because if there was a bit of a flame in the public domain from the shopkeeper, which was negligent, there's no ways that the camel's owner would be responsible, because only a certain point of contact that would set the whole process in motion would cause it. So it's not like the camel's owner has to stop the camel going from each and every part and setting it like the mansion. When you want to say that there has to be direct payment for full, direct contact for full payment, now you've got to explain why the camel's owner never stopped his animal through this whole process. Do you get it?
Mm.
Do you get why that's the case? So it depends.
Say that again, please. Just repeat that, please.
No problem. So according to Rav Yochanan, it's easy. The camel's owner is not responsible, because this happens in the blink of an eye. A flat set alight, walks past a thatch roof, that goes a light, and the next thing, the mansion is burned to the ground. Because Rav Yochanan deems tzoros, or one's animal's arrows, for causing the fire. Okay? So in that particular case, it's easy. With Reish Lakish, one of the features is who owns the flame, and one of the features is the amount of direct contact, because he doesn't believe in tzoros, the force of the fire, to carry on from the point at which you set it alight. So if you start a little fire, before you turn around, your camel started a blaze and the whole thing burnt down. Then the camel's owner is really not as responsible, because he can't stop it. But when your camel has to literally ignite each and every beam, you've got plenty of time to try and hold your camel back, or at least make a concerted effort. And therefore, it has to be deemed that why isn't the camel's owner partially responsible? Does that make sense? And why in the brisa that says there's half payment damages for burning down the mansion, he would say that maybe the shopkeeper should share half, and maybe the camel owner should share half, because the camel owner is responsible, because each and every bit beam would have to be lit. But in a case of direct contact, Reish Lakish says there's full payment. So again, Reish Lakish would say that it's full payment for direct contact, yet maybe they both share the cost. But it's much more difficult to explain Reish Lakish than Rav Yochanan, because Rav Yochanan just says once you set it alight, it goes on its own.
But is that considered abnormal? Like, if it's abnormal, then it's half damages?
No, it's not abnormal. The fact of it is, if the animals are walking outside and you've got a lamp and they've got flammable material on their back, it's very normal that an accident would happen. That's why the shopkeeper is liable. Absolutely.
So the owner...
It's not an accident, it's negligence by the shopkeeper. You're right. Kevin was right. Negligence. So, because...
But tzoros doesn't have to be, just for Kevin, sorry. Tzoros doesn't have to be abnormal. Just for Kevin's sake, sorry.
Okay. But Damon, so the owner of the camel is going to take flack for this.
He's going to take flack for it, yeah. Now, listen, the case where it mentioned Keren Tam and tzoros was coming to teach us before about, do we pay quarter payment damages, or are the damages limited to half payment if you had Keren Tam and tzoros working together in the previous Mishnah? on the 19th Mishnah. That was a different discussion about how the two would interplay together. But you don't necessarily have Keren Tam when you have Tzoros. That was just an example given before to show how the payments would they be half and half being quarter damages, or would they limit at half? That was a previous Mishnah. So Gavin, it's a good point. In the Mishnah's second case, the shopkeeper alone is liable because he was negligent in that he left his lamp outside. However, the camel's owner did not have a chance to realize what was happening before his camel touched its burning load against some part of the mansion. And that can only be explained according to Rav Yochanan, who said that a fire was once force, at which once it was set in motion, the animal Tzoros would continue for half payment damages. And it wasn't direct contact. So we're going to end off on this note. I just want to go through one quick thing quickly. We didn't do today's Mishnah Berurah. We've got 4 minutes left. So in the Shulchan Aruch, section 190, and in the Mishnah Berurah, section 188, okay, what we're learning by Rabbi Daniel Brody is benching by mistake. It can happen that a person benches even though he's not finished eating. This is more likely where the after bracha is short, like Borena for short or Ala Mechia. So the question is, when one continues eating afterwards, does he make a new bracha? Like a new before bracha. So you've said Borena for short or the ending bracha, but if you continue, do you say a new beginning bracha? So if you forgot that you have had more food or that you plan to eat more, then the after bracha you have made and what you have eaten ends that meal. And you must actually make a new before bracha before continuing, so that if a person benches by mistake, how do you bench by mistake? You forget that you're going to eat more. That benching is valid, and you have to make a new before bracha when eating. So in other words, what we want to do here is not waste a bracha where you've used Hashem's name many times, like Birkat Hamazon, etc. So that Al Natilat Yadayim and Amotzi Lechem Ben Haaretz are quicker brachas, where you're not using a whole succession of brachas where Hashem's name is vain. So you have to start a new bracha if you're going to eat more, in order that that last bracha was not said by accident. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, James, would that be a situation where you finished eating, and then somebody comes around with a surprise ice cream, and you never had that in mind, and you want to eat that ice cream, you're going to say a new bracha for that, right?
Yeah, that would be a good example. Yeah, that would be a good example. Or you had something to eat quickly, you did it after bracha, and you were going to shoot out to a client, and you're still relatively starving, and then it's that the client wants to delay your appointment by another hour or so, and you're just quite ravenous. You haven't even had breakfast.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do the Birkat Hamazon as a waste. So it's easier just to do the newer brachas because there's less using of Hashem's name.
Okay.
So in other words, you haven't wasted Hashem's name at all.
Okay, that's
just
great.
starting a new bracha. What you should do then is actually go into a separate room. So because if you go to a separate makom, it's actually, and you come back to that, but you don't just go to a separate room. I learned that you have to go to a separate room and do an activity there, and so that you're not just going to that room stump. So when you go in a new room, you do a new activity there for a second, and then you started your benching afresh. All right, guys, listen, this camel thing was the only thing we learned here is Reish Lakish's second rule about direct contact of flame in order to be liable, not like Rav Yochanan, who said once you set a flame in motion, you're responsible for half payment damages for the rest of it with Tzoros. And Reish Lakish says direct flame-edge contact is full payment damages, apart from the property of who owns the flame. That's what we learned today. We're giving you a 30-second summary. So that's it.
Thanks, mate. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I feel better after this, I must admit.
Another session, but we can actually continue tomorrow.